Hi, welcome back to the UK Medical Freedom Alliance. My name is Ian Humphreys, and welcome along to a really interesting podcast today. We're going to be talking to Mick Stott from Spectrum Transition Coaching, and I'm just going to tell you a very brief little bit about them. This is their logo. You can find them on the internet at spectrumtc.co.uk. That's the best place to go to contact them. And once you've heard what they're all about, I'm sure you are going to want to do that. They've been designed specifically to connect people, even with the most complex presenting issues, connect them to their emotions for the purpose of change. And it's a new approach. It's a new set of positive beliefs and behaviours, allowing people to lead more enriching lives, becoming more resilient when faced with everyday stresses or challenges that their past self may have struggled with. The organisation believes that being traumatised once is enough, and quite often talking simply reminds people of where they've been. Spectrum Transition Coaching was designed with this in mind to ensure people are kept safe and out of the content of their experiences. It's a completely unique approach. I'd certainly not heard of anywhere else, and Mick explains that he doesn't think anywhere else is doing this particular kind of transition coaching. They can identify the root causes of any presenting issue, and they have the key to change it. So there you go. That is a little excerpt from their website, Spectrum Transition Coaching, Pioneering Change. Especially focusing on things like PTSD, addiction, depression, anxiety, stress, eating disorders, relationships, and confidence. So, without further ado, we're going to go over and speak to Mick, but that is just after this brief message. The UK Medical Freedom Alliance is the UK's most recognised and respected organisation campaigning for your right to informed consent, bodily autonomy, and medical choice, and supporting doctors to uphold these rights. We are the UK's voice of ethical medicine. Please visit our website at ukmedfreedom.org, where you will find full details of our open letters, our podcasts, campaigns, information and template letters. Please sign up to receive our newsletter and be notified of our new campaigns, open letters and calls to action, and any other important updates. Watch out for us in the media as we make our presence felt in the mainstream media and other places, especially alternative media, and also on our own podcast. So while speaking of social media, remember you can find us on Facebook and Telegram, X, formerly Twitter. From an audio perspective, you'll find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favourite podcasting platform. And finally, on video, loud and proud on YouTube. But in particular, please go to our Rumble channel, which is the platform for free speech. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you go. And finally, on our website, you will be able to donate to us via donor box or buy me a coffee. Anything you can will help us greatly continue with this platform and our services. And with that, thank you very much. And now on with the podcast. Mick, thanks so much for joining the podcast. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks for giving up your time. As you know, UKMFA is an organisation that's not for profit, and we're all about bodily autonomy, informed consent, medical choice, and just having that freedom to follow the medical path that you need to follow, as opposed to one that's prescribed to you without having the correct informed consent. And we're starting to come across lots of other organisations now, like yours and other sort of natural health medicines and the like, that clearly have got a lot of services to offer people. And more and more, I think, are turning to those alternative routes rather than down the NHS route. So really, I think the first question is could you give us a little bit of background to your organisation and how it started, how your background kind of lent into that, and where you think it's going? I know it's a big long question, but just open the floor to let you tell us all about the organisation.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting that we use the word alternative as well, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah.
I once stood up at Portcullis House at a gathering of all the mental health professionals with a guy, a friend of mine called Simon Weston, who some people might remember. And he said he found it amazing that within that room there are an awful lot of mental health professionals that admitted what they were doing with the veteran community at the level of treatment wasn't working. And he said what he found astounding was that there were other things that were working that they called alternative. And he's to quote him, he said, alternative comedy. If it's funny. Alternative treatment, if it works, it works. Surely this is more about how do we engage with it. And of course, my journey started a long way back. I mean, I'm a 30-year veteran, and my job in the military, I was a training analyst predominantly, but specialised in the design, implementation, validation of training. And my job was to look at an activity, design a training on what I saw that would be as realistic as possible without killing anyone. So that essentially was my job for the main part of my career. Of course, I went on ops, and of course, I had lots of different experiences in the military. But essentially, I was involved in the mental and physical preparation, preparing people to fight war, and that came with its own journey. Towards the end of my career, I was being asked why we were losing so many great people, so many good recruits, and so many people that were going home. I came to the conclusion, having looked across the UK at the mental health organisations and the personal development organisations, that we had a great model for thinking, we had a great model for doing, but we didn't really have anything that helped people when they were feeling unsettled. And everything we do comes from how we deal with our emotions. It's our emotions that force us to do everything. At that point, I realised I was probably in the wrong place to tell people that in reality, if we don't support people emotionally, then we're in danger of leaving them high and dry with things like post-traumatic stress disorder and the after effects of them not being supported emotionally. I then resigned my commission, and I stayed with a couple of organisations for a little while, which topped my career up to about 30 years. But what I was actually doing was I was refining the process that I then, when I resigned, I got out and delivered to broader communities. And ironically, I ended up working with more service people having resigned than I did when I was in the military. So, and I worked with international sport, international business. So I worked as a mindset coach with international sport, produced a number of Olympians, and also mentored international sports coaches. So I was totally in the arena of mindset.
Can I just take you back to the military side? So, because we've seen such a lot of things in the news and in Hollywood films and you name it, where they talk about the Vietnam veterans and what they suffered when they came back from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Why haven't these lessons been learned already? Because they surely had a hell of a lot to deal with then, and then obviously we've had subsequent wars in Iraq and the like. So did they not learn those lessons about PTSD and the kind of the trauma that people went through then?
Well, I think you have to be prepared to think outside of the box. The NICE model, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, is a self-funding, self-licking lollipop, really. That's the way I describe it, because it only really supports itself. For you to bring something that's, let's say, out of the box in terms of its thinking, and then introduce it and formalise it, you have to go through a series of gatekeepers to do that. And what I found when we tried to engage with the mainstream system was that it was the gatekeepers, that the ones that had learned something for 7 or 8, 9, 10 years, that weren't prepared to let go of what they've learned, and literally kept doing the same thing and expected something different to happen. You don't need to listen to Mick Stott when it comes to what works and what doesn't work. There's enough research out there to show you. And equally, when I was at Portcullis House with Simon, I stood up as an analyst and I asked the professors in the room, well, if what you're doing for mental health is not working, what are you all professors of? You see, I'd come from a performance background, Ian. And for me, I didn't have to tell anyone if I could kayak a river. I would sit in a kayak it, get to the end of it, have a lot of fun, and people could see I could kayak it. And I came from a background that if we need post-nominals to prove who we are, we probably don't believe in ourselves. And what I found was that when you go into some of these arenas, as we did with combat stress, and interesting how combat stress was defunded for spending more on real estate than actual treatment, you then start to see that some of these organisations are not necessarily set up at the level of loving the individual that they want to help. I'm not saying that everybody falls into that space, but you don't know what you don't know until you find out. But you've also got to be prepared to think outside of a frame that you're forced down. I failed my AS psychology. That's a half A level. And I failed it because I could not translate it to anything in the real world at the level of performance. Didn't get it. I even spoke to my teacher and I said, can you show me, if I got 5 people that I want to take down this river, and this river is likely to kill them if they get it wrong, can you show me how I get them to relax? And he said, no. I said, well, you're a psychology teacher. He said, my job is to give you the what, is to give you the model. What you do with it is your business. And I said, wow. So what's the problem? What's the point in having the what if you don't have the how? So for me, it was a simple equation, because I wanted to take all of the information, and I spent over £40,000 just on my own personal development when I left the military, only to realise that there's no such thing as personal development. What we specialise in is deconstructing all the things that you've imagined that hold you back. And even if you look at elite performance now, you have generally 4 components to it: tactical, technical, mental and physical. And the biggest grey area to this day is how we apply the mental element of that, because at elite performance, all the others are equal, essentially.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course, people are people, so people have emotions. Emotions drive pretty much everything we do, irrespective of how complex our situation is or how simple it is. And so I designed my model on some very simple modalities.
And when did that start? So this was the germination of Spectrum, then, I guess. So when did you start that off?
Yeah, well, I introduced performance coaching to the British Army in 2003 via another organisation, Initial Training Group Instructor School. And what we found was, when we started to use it, that it worked for about 60% of the people we were working with, but it didn't for the 40%. It then became apparent quite quickly that these other 40% had got trauma. And equally, the challenge that I had when I started to look at a coaching model, and of course, people sort of go coaching. Well, Spectrum coaching is not like any other coaching model, like life coaching or performance coaching, and I'll explain why later, or I can give you information around that. So never confuse the two. Spectrum transition coaching was about, actually, how do we find out what your trauma was, and can we create a system for taking a look at that without re-traumatizing you? Some of the psychodynamic approaches re-traumatize people. And if you have a lot of trauma, if you've had a lot of trauma and you talk to a counsellor, it might very well be that, as we found, that you can't even settle down for 2 to 3 weeks afterwards. With some of the soldiers that we were talking to, they would literally be waiting for somebody to attack the house. Some of them bought rifles. Some of them were now starting to gather weapons, which really is not much use in society. And so, we started at a point where we were looking at what was out there, and we thought, well, if we keep doing this, what's already gone, then we're not really going to get any great results. And so that started around about 2004 when I resigned my commission. I was still working at the Military Academy Sandhurst and a couple of other universities. And I started to look at things in more detail. So I was more interested in how do we deconstruct as opposed to add on. You can only add on when you've deconstructed the stuff that's been getting in the way of you even seeing what you want at the level of something positive. So the model really started to evolve then. And since then, it's been validated, it's grown. My personal belief, Ian, is that if something isn't out of date the moment it's written, it's not intelligent. Because it's not evolving, it's not proactive. You look at any other area of business, and what really amazed me about the world of psychotherapy was that if you look at CBT, you look at some of these other models, they've never changed.
Right.
They've never really evolved, and they haven't really evolved because they're not intelligent. And that's a big thing to say, because you can still get some results with a CBT. You can still get some results with EMDR, IEMT, EFT, TFT. How comprehensive they are is another question. And I didn't want to repeat what was already out there, because my military career taught me to think outside of the box and create something that is fit for purpose. You know, the first question I asked myself was, could I make somebody worse?
Right.
And so that really was a start point.
And I guess, and trauma itself, I guess, comes in many guises and can be low level, high level, but depending on the individual as to what that trauma does to that individual's personality, psyche, etc., I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've sat down with psychiatrists, I've sat down with psychologists. Some of them have actually come on the change programs that I run because they wanted to sample what we were doing. A couple of the professors at the University of Central Lancashire, when we launched in 2013, you know, one of them in particular, she came on one of our change programs because she wanted to know what it was about. And there's nothing actually better than having a personal experience. The greatest thing about trauma is that if you can break it down into its component parts, which is one, how you learn it, and two, what emotions are present when you experience it, you're much closer to creating a tool that allows you to change your relationship with it. You know, if you can imagine, if I've had lots and lots of trauma and someone wants me to talk about the detail of my trauma, I mean, how much have I stored neurologically? So for me, it was always that, how much have we actually stored? How flexible is our nervous system? How did we learn it? What are the emotional elements to it? And how do we change your relationship with all of those? And so that really was my start point. And of course, the first start point that any clinician should have, and I don't put myself out there as a clinician, because I don't like to use those terms, because that uses, it would almost suggest that you're using some of the psychodynamic models, and I don't use any of those. But if we put it in those simple terms and we look at that, then the first question you should be able to answer is, can I make somebody's life worse? And I never wanted to do that. So I created a system that you don't have to share the content of your trauma, because we deal with the emotional elements of it. When somebody has trauma, there's always anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, and anxiety connected to that trauma. That's the simple truth. And I work on simple truths as opposed to complicated scenarios. The military certainly teaches you that. Keep it simple for everyone. So you know, it was about analysing, how does someone install this trauma? What is their weight as well? What is their emotional weight in their life? And so I came up with a field tool for measuring that, because one of the things that concerned me when I got into this arena was, if I can make somebody worse, how do I measure where they're at? Now, there isn't another diagnostic tool out there that I'm aware of that measures somebody's emotional weight in their nervous system. And of course, having worked in extreme environments with skiing, climbing, kayaking, elite performance, you start to realise that the more you up the consequence, the greater reaction you get from a person that maybe or may not be relaxed. And that's always emotional. So the first tool that I created was a way of measuring that. And so we subdivided a person into the areas of their life. So when I do an initial consultation, I'm interested in which areas of their life have contained anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, and anxiety. And if we can identify those, we can then start to see just how much emotional stuff they've accumulated in their nervous system. And from my perspective, it's your nervous system that either allows you to perform or stops you. One of the things that really used to drive me insane when I was in the military was, some of the instructors would say to me, "We're getting rid of Corporal such a body because he's got a bad attitude." And I asked them to tell me the component parts of attitude, and they couldn't. So I said, well, you can't label someone with a bad attitude if you can't tell me what attitude is. So the first thing I set out to do was also look at the component parts of attitude. And of course, when you start to look at that, experience becomes very clear. And you see for every experience that we have, there is a trigger to something that allows us to achieve it, or there's a trigger to something that stops us from achieving it. And so understanding all those layers, without going into too much detail, if you understand the building blocks of experience and you know how to change those, if you can change the building blocks of experience, the experience itself has to change.
So going back to the traumas themselves, can they stack up as well? So are you looking at, there could be a number of traumas that then stack up to the point where then the emotion breaks down?
Absolutely. So the thing is, trauma, it's almost like you go through life putting things into your nervous system.
Right.
And then you get to a point, some people get to a point where they step over a threshold. So it might be going on military operations. It might be giving birth to a baby. It might be a road traffic accident. It could be anything that is emotionally significant in your world that pushes you over a threshold.
Right.
And at that point, your mind starts to present the past. And of course, if you've got lots in the past, then that's when some people experience complete overwhelm.
Right.
And with some people, their body speaks their mind. So they might not necessarily be, let's say, mentally perturbed, but it could be that they become physically ill. I fell into the latter group. I never really felt mentally traumatized, but I certainly was becoming more physically ill. I had asthma, hay fever beyond what was reasonable. I was starting to be tested for stomach cancer because of the reflux that I was experiencing. And of course, having done the emotional work thereafter, all of that's disappeared and left my world. I'm seldom unwell now. Whereas towards the end of my military career, I was unwell regularly.
Right.
I would lose my voice sometimes. And, I used to train lifeguards at Winchester, and there was a lovely GP at Winchester, a real old doctor. And he said to me, Mick, he said, you're stressed. And I used to say, stress? I said, I don't do stress. I said, well, I reckon that loss of voice is connected to something stressful. But these are the types of people that make you think, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that connection you said about cancer in particular. I've heard this regularly now that trauma is triggering various cancers.
Well, you see, for me, Ian, it's really quite simple. Your mind and your body are the same thing. The mind-body connection. No one ever got unwell because they were happy,
right,
or loved. So it's the opposite numbers that have the potential to create disease. And dis-ease, what does dis-ease mean? It means an uneasy system.
Right.
So if we can find out what is making our system uneasy and change that, which, by the way, the world of modern psychology would have you believe that, PTSD is for life. I never believed that. Not even from the outset, because I was experiencing, even some of the training rooms that I was running as a trainer, I had a way of being able to influence people with language that would get them to think about things from a different perspective. And some of them would feel relief. But it wasn't a dedicated paradigm. So Spectrum is now, the transition coaching is a dedicated paradigm for emotional transition.
And how do people find Spectrums? I mean, are they referred? Do you advertise? How do you get people to come to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got a website, spectrumtc.co.uk is the website. And there's quite a bit of information on the website. We show you that we do one-to-ones, we do change programs. We also train our own coaches and trainers. And that's where we're at right now. We're looking at producing all of our own trainers, all of our own coaches, because we see that with what's happened after COVID, there's a massive need to help people. And of course, I spent an awful lot of money even getting onto the first step of personal development. I did my practitioner neuro-linguistic programming, and that cost me nearly $3,500. And I'm talking 2004. And I said, well, how many people can afford to spend 2,500, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, over 10,000 for a trainer's program? How many people could afford to do that? What I wanted to do was make it as cheap as chips so that people could literally take the first step without any massive commitment to see whether or not they even like you or whatever it is they're engaging with. There's one thing for sure, you will do a lot of things that you enjoy doing. And for me, work has never really felt like work since I left the military, because I love helping people with their trauma. And so the website gives you all of that information. It also shows you the different levels of award and what you need to do in order to achieve those.
How much of NLP do you use in your sort of everyday treatments? And because it fascinates me, because I remember watching an old VHS video of NLP years ago, and of all people in the audience, learning was Derren Brown. You know, it's and I think Paul McKenna was running it with I can't remember the other guy's name now, but yeah,
probably he ran it with one of the founders of NLP. I can't.
It's just his name escapes me at the moment, but
it'll come to me in a moment.
But it was fascinating, what they were doing there, and
Richard Bandler.
That's it.
Yeah. He was doing a lot with Paul McKenna.
Yeah,
and of course, I've never really been into quantity. I'd rather have quality. NLP is not a safe modality for the comprehensive treatment of a trauma. It's not. It only has one or two interventions that are bitty at best and limited at worst. So it isn't a comprehensive system. And equally, one of the challenges that I had was that with the guys that I had to connect to in order to gain some of my awards, I didn't buy into the value systems. I wasn't interested in selling £33,000 worth of training room goods in the first 4 days of an NLP practitioner training. Sales was never one of my intentions. My main intention was therapeutic change without necessarily applying the principles of therapy. And, when I spoke to the guys in the professors at the University of Central Lancashire, they positioned Spectrum as bridging the gap between therapy and coaching.
Right.
So NLP is a great way of getting to understand and expand your way of thinking around how the mind works. It's great for doing that.
But having had that experience and learnt some of that, I mean, did you notice that this was being used on the population in the last couple of years or so?
I'm a master trainer of NLP, so you can't not notice. You can hear, even if you watch Obama speak, you watch the politicians speak, they've been given a brief that's a high-level brief that operates at the level of values, and they simply regurgitate values when they answer a question, because you can't argue with values.
Right.
But if somebody said to me, well, we're doing this in the interest of safety, and I said, how specifically are you doing that, with whom, where, when, how, what, and who? They wouldn't really want to answer that. That's considered rude in political circles, because you're now chunking them down. So being chunked down is not the kind of thing you do to someone who's trying to bluff you. So and of course, even Milton Erickson. So if you look at NLP was based on the modelling of 3 prolific therapists and a guy who was renowned for creating strategy. And if you actually look at those 3 individually and you go back to the original workings, you'll get far more than what NLP would offer, because they were already in the arena of change.
Right. Okay. So if they've used NLP on the population, as well as other coercions to undertake various interventions, so we say, and you then begin to awaken to the fact that something has happened to you that you really don't like, so therefore now you're experiencing probably a traumatic event, I would say.
Yeah.
And as people gradually wake up to what's been going on in the world, more and more people are going to experience these traumas. So your trainers that you are putting together, I mean, are they geographically well spaced out around the UK, and will they work in those geographical locations, or do they work where you work?
We had a different model before, in so much that people would come on, become a trainer, and go back to the police or the physiotherapy environment they were in. No, what we're actually saying is that we want people to come on solely for the purpose of helping people recover from trauma. And so it's a subtly different model, Ian, because what we want now to specialise in trauma. as opposed to somebody literally going back to a physiotherapy environment and just using it every now and again to alleviate pain or to have conversations with patients and clients that are emotional. You know, when you become ill, it's a leveler.
Yeah.
You're forced to pay attention to yourself. If you become injured, it's a leveler. And so if you think about the conversation we had earlier, if you look what the government's done, the government has provided that threshold with COVID-19 as the panacea for everyone to panic.
Yes.
And what it's done is it's initiated anyone that was like ticking along okay, if we can now take away your livelihood, if we can put everything that you would like into a big question mark and make you anxious about that or make you fearful, that's going to bring up your past trauma. So that's what they've done. So people will often get aggressive and they don't even know why they're getting aggressive. They will be reacting and half of them won't even know why. You know, there's a model that we would say that everything around you becomes a mirror for the stuff that you're holding on the inside. People become mirrors and situations become mirrors. And what COVID did was it added a significant emotional weight to everyone to the point where it brought their stuff up. And of course, a lot of people won't even know that's going on because they're not aware of blind spots and, you know, the place that they've stored their trauma. You know, one of the things that we do in an elicitation is we bring you out of denial. You know, the number of veterans that have been asked to come on the program when they think there's actually nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
And it's family that will often say, well, actually, you've turned into a misery gut. You're no longer the son that we had. You're no longer the person that we know.
So I was listening to an interesting conversation earlier. You probably know Ahmed Malik, Doc Malik, and he was talking about his own experience and the fact that he actually took an injection because he was under so much coercion and so much pressure. But then after that event, he was in tears in the car because he suddenly realised what he'd done.
Yeah.
That he felt was a negative thing to do for him. And I don't know, I think I'm starting to imagine a scenario now where we've come so far, even if we're just talking about that COVID stroke and then medical intervention type events, that we're starting to reach a point where people will start to realise en masse actually that things are wrong. And I think that's already started. I'm starting to get a lot of feedback from people that say, I'm not sure we've done the right thing here and we're never going to do it again. But now they're worried because of what may come in the future regarding how they might be affected as to adverse reactions, etc.
Yeah.
So if we've got that sort of, well, it could be a significant problem, plus we've got talks of world war, plus we've got talk of financial collapse, plus we've got all sorts of things that are being mentioned. And I know we're a medical freedom organisation, but I think this is all about that. It's about, well, how do we seek the help once we start to feel these traumas build, and that's why I was asking about whether they stack, because I think it feels like it's one thing after another. Like,
well, they're intentionally adding those layers in.
Yes,
but that's not by chance. I mean, look at the concept of conscription. What would make somebody panic? I volunteered to join the army to go and fight for my country and to defend my country. You know, they say one volunteer is worth 25 pressed men. You know, and ultimately, by suggesting on mainstream media that there could be conscription down the line, what impact might that have on someone who's a non-combatant?
Sure.
And they've done that on purpose. And equally, you could argue it's another psyop, because if we get lots of resistance to it, we know that people are not prepared to fight. So we can actually then, as a government, now start to mission creep and do more and more until we get to the point where people are squeezed. You know, so I can say from a military career that the government have absolutely, they do not have your interests at heart at all. And I can categorically put my hand on my heart and say that, because I've been on the receiving end of those.
Yes.
And you know, politicians are like cheap watches. They lie regularly. They're paid to lie.
Yeah. And
it's probably one of the little criteria that you need to tick before you go into politics.
So do you see the kind of therapy, I should call it therapies, your coaching, should we say, rather than therapies? Do you see your coaching as helping in that future to tackle what is going on here?
Well, that's exactly why we created the Happiness Accelerator, which is just the cheapest chips program that people can come and learn some really basic skills that are actually pretty significantly groundbreaking. And you can see that on the website. And that's designed for anyone who wants to be introduced to a mechanism for change. You know, it sounds really simple, doesn't it? We just work with a family that are going through a divorce, and it's had a massive impact on the family. And of course, each child is an individual in their own right. They're all unique individuals. And so some need more support, some need less support. But as quickly as we engage with the family, they're now all moving forwards within 2 weeks. What we want to be able to do is to get mum and dad or whoever to have a little skill set that they can apply with someone, that if they apply that, this person will not only start to move forwards, but they'll start to recognise how they react when they're under pressure, and all of that becomes then an education. But you need some empowering mechanisms for doing that. That's where NLP was quite good, because it had little mini tools and mechanisms for changing your mindset, for harnessing your mindset in a positive way, in a purposeful way. So that's where it was good. Yeah.
Okay.
Great for motivation, great for harnessing the individual. Where it wasn't very good was it wasn't comprehensive enough to get rid of the stuff that stopped you from going forward. And
where you've got divisions in families, which has also become quite prevalent over the last few years, you know, because they've got different ideas on whether you should take an injection, you know, whether COVID was real or not, whether, you know, whatever it might be. But there was lots and lots of arguments around that. How do they mend? How can they use your systems to mend those rifts? Totally, and the thing is, remember that everyone works on what they feel and what they believe. And can you change what somebody believes? Yes, of course you can, by challenging what they believe in a gentle way, and also recognising that all families, at the heart of what they do, they love each other. Yeah. But what the government did was it forced people into the world of behaviour. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Take the jab, don't take the jab. That's behaviour. And we generally never disagree at the level of value. So we can say, we all want to be safe, we all want to be healthy, and we'd go, great. The only time we disagree is when you start to chunk down to how we achieve that. And what's happened is people have got locked in at the level of behaviour. Why do you think the government said 6 feet apart? Because it's a behaviour. The more they can control your behaviour, the more people focus on behaviour, the more they get lost. And that's why behavioural strategies are being deployed, because they force people into one or two camps, and it always creates division. Right. So getting back to love and happiness is a little journey, and that requires a skill set of influence, which, you know, can be done by language and change. Okay. From an ethical point of view, I think we've certainly noticed, and, you know, we've campaigned on it from our organisation in terms of the lack of medical ethics that now seems to be around in the NHS and beyond. Do you come across that experience in your work? Do you get that kind of feedback from your clients? Have you experienced it yourself? And how do you approach ethics in your own work in terms of explaining to people what to expect in the interventions and the interactions with yourselves? Well, it was one of the biggest questions when I was sat at, and this is when I said, you know, if you have to put post-nominals after your name, you probably don't believe it. Because great performers don't need any post-nominals to prove they can do it or not. They just do it. And of course, that was one of my very early learnings. So the hierarchy, when I chatted to the professors at the University of Central Lancashire, the first question they asked me was, what is your academic background? And I sort of heartily said 3 CSEs and an ASBO. and I remember there was a psychiatrist there from Combat Stress, and he said, so you don't have any academic background? I said, nope. I said, because I don't know how to apply it. So I asked him a question, and I said to him, hey,
As a matter of interest, when was the last time you got hold of a 23-year-old paratrooper with post-traumatic stress disorder and convinced him to sit down in a chair because you could help him change his relationship with his trauma? When was the last time you did that as a psychiatrist? And the answer was just a blank face. I said, well, that says it all. I said, I'm in the arena of how, not the arena of what.
Yeah.
And you can, so ultimately what we show is that there's a whole shift in hierarchy. When you sit with another soul, and I'm going to say soul, when you sit with another human, another soul, there is no hierarchy in evolution. There is no hierarchy in help. Because, a great skill set to have is to let the client know, and I don't even like calling them clients, that only they have their own answers. And that's a very powerful place to put them. Mm. But you see, wherever you have a hierarchy, I've got to be the specialist. I've got to be the one that knows something that you don't know. When in reality, that's not true. It's not true at all. I don't know a thing about any client I ever meet. They know. So my job is to use my skill set to get them to find out what they need to learn to change their relationship with things that have not helped them, so that they can have the realization and step forward into their own power. There aren't many psychodynamic models that are even based on that principle. Mm. And that's a good old-fashioned principle of military training. If you go right to the level of, if you went through the whole spectrum of training, the most elite trained troops are the ones that have no one to thank other than themselves, because it's a journey of self-reliance. And of course, when you become self-reliant, you realize actually no man is an island, so we interdepend. But that's a journey, and that's a simple journey that I take most people on. The way we do that is we help them get rid of the stuff that stops them from doing that is emotional, and equally, there's no hierarchy with that. Right. So we never create dependencies, and equally, we don't put ourselves on pedestals, and equally, we're not the specialists, and equally, if someone doesn't want to work with us, and we don't want to work with them, we don't. That seldom happens, because that's generally about rapport. But remember, you can be a mirror for somebody else's journey.
Right.
You can bring up somebody else's stuff and not even know that you're doing that. Mm. And of course, this was news to the professors, because they're going, "Oh my God, So would you be interested in an honorary doctorate if we?" I said, "No, not at all. Mm. No, why would I want that? I don't need anyone to tell me I'm great at something. I've never needed fluffing up or putting out in front of a room to prove who I am." And of course, we want people to step into their own power on that premise. And when your intention and your building blocks are based on that, that's what you put out there, that's what you create.
So you've got the power of the individual in a world where they're trying to take that individuality away.
Totally. Look at sovereign training. Mm. When we did the sovereign training was about you recognizing that you are the one with the power. Mm. Anyone that tries to take that away from you is either badly trained or doesn't have your interests at heart.
In which case, then, what we're looking at is every large organisation in the world, globally.
Yep.
It doesn't appear, unless either it's run by idiots who don't understand what they're doing, or they are deliberately removing our individuality and sovereignty.
Well, I think just by belief systems, you can have very useful idiots. So if you get people to just follow instructions, because if they don't follow an instruction, they're culpable or answerable, that will be enough for some people to never even question the protocol that they've been given. Mm. In the military, we encouraged young leaders to question everything and to come up with their own solutions, So when you have that as an outset, then at least you've got a system that's prepared to challenge everything. But that's not true about a lot of these other organisations. When I worked with the NHS, I couldn't believe they were more hierarchical than the military and less cooperative.
Yeah,
much less cooperative. Consultants. When I wanted my first training as an NLP trainer was to a group of NHS GPs and consultants. The consultants wouldn't even sit with the GPs when it came to doing interventions. They wouldn't do that. And I went, "Oh, wow. So you're a team." But we know that they're not a team, really. And we know that now, if you look at the NHS is not what it professes to be. It's just a series of limited companies that are going down an American route. very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think it has been for a while, to be honest, because they kept talking about a national health service, but it's not. It's a series of trusts that all do things in a different way. There's nothing consistent right across the board. They all collect their data in different ways, present it in different ways. It's not a national.
I can guarantee you, the moment banks get involved, which they are, the moment you get a banker involved in what you're doing, then you just watch what happens and how it becomes performance driven. And I can guarantee it'll never be the beneficiary that's on the receiving end of the benefits. So that, for me, is an oxymoron to call somebody a beneficiary of the NHS.
I think sadly, it's also true of the large charities in the country and around the world too.
Yeah, and what's also sad is you've got some exceptionally nice, loving, caring people right at the interface of patients that I have no doubt want to do their absolute best for that patient. They're not the ones who design the paradigms or the protocols.
No, and they're not. What's the right word to put this? Well, if I liken it to charity, only because I used to work in a charity, so I kind of experienced this, but they're not charity people. So the charity people are doing the charity work, and that's fine. They do a brilliant job, and you could never say otherwise. But the people that are running the organisations are now from so-called corporate big business. They're coming from the outside.
But stakeholders.
Yeah, and they don't have charity experience. They operate outside of what the paradigm would have been previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you've got stakeholders, you've got people to impress.
Yeah.
You've got people that want performance, and when ego and performance walk into a room, care and consideration have a habit of flying out the window.
Right. Okay. So where do we go now? I don't want to keep you too much longer because it's amazing how quickly the time goes. It's just vanishing. I could talk to you all day, to be honest.
It goes on, and people sort of go, "Oh my God, an hour and a half."
Yeah. So I think I was supposed to go to bed. Anyway, look. We're going to catch up again. I'm absolutely certain. Is there anything else you want to add right now?
No, just what we want to do is get as many people coming through the Happiness Accelerator.
Okay.
Like I say, it costs next to nothing, and it'll give you a massive insight, and you get half-day training, consolidation of what you do, which is a face-to-face with myself, and we're looking to create more and more coaches, more and more trainers. Okay.
Well, look, we'll put all the details in the blurb with the video.
Yeah.
We'll get as many people as we can, certainly from our point of view, to get in touch so they can find out, all about the organisation. I've seen your two little videos, which are fantastic and really hit home. Actually, I have to say, it's a very
and it does what it says on the tin. And the thing is, Ian, what the universities could never argue with, irrespective of the post-nominals, was we got results.
Right. That's the most important thing.
Yep.
Well, Mick, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks ever so much for your time, and we'll definitely speak again. And you take good care. All right, there you go.
All the best, and all the best to everyone that's out there. Wish you all the best.
Thanks so much.